Hi, I hope everybody is doing well. This is our last stream for this channel in 2023, so 2024 will be here soon. Just thought I would come on today. Don't really have anything new. Was just going to finish up the Dozier School for Boys video that we were watching last time, that documentary, and talk about it a little bit, and then start in on the Gypsy Rose stuff since I see everybody so interested in it right now, and everybody has such big feelings about it, but I'm just not sure if everyone who has opinions, if they have went back to the beginning, if they went back and seen the interrogations, the interviews, the trials, did they listen to Nick's confession? Did they listen to Gypsy on the stand at Nick's trial? All of those things makes me wonder, but so if you're not familiar with the Dozier School for Boys, my last live covered it in depth. I'm going to pick up where I left off there. It'll take about 25 minutes to wrap this part up. So if you're not interested in Dozier, you can skip on if you're watching the replay. Give me just a second. I'll pull it up here.
Thanks, Theo. The trees look great.
Thanks.
You know, U.S. Bank has great business checking accounts for all of those leaves.
Would I be able to open a checking account?
You also say that what you believe happened to Black boys who were there was even worse.
Absolutely. They did all the grunt work. They were on the side where all the cattle had
Made
to
them
be
stay on a separate
slaughtered and
side,
taken
guys.
care of. They had all the chickens and all of the crops, and all of the work. That was hard in the sun, in the fields, whereas on the other side, we had the radio shop and the bricklaying shop and electronics shop and this, that, and the other, where you could actually learn a little something. Unless you wanted to be a farmer, you really going to learn much over there.
I see.
And they were beaten pretty badly as well.
From what you've heard.
Yes.
And I understand that the school was desegregated in the late 1960s and that sort of thing. Let me kind of go here with
speed
this
it up
now.
for the sake of time.
You say being in Marianna at that time was how involved you all believe people who lived near the school? What do you think they knew about? Do you think they were aware of what was
they
going
were
on?
more than
or
aware.
Or do you believe? How would you know that?
Well, we know it. We know it in several different ways. They encircled that town in a ring of silence. You did not. This is what one. Well, three ladies told me the same thing, calling in and talking to me. They said, you don't talk about the boys or what happened to them to strangers, because if you did, your barn could get burnt, your cattle could be poisoned, or you might get hit in the head by a hunter's stray bullet. And she said, by the way, that's the word out today. And whenever a boy ran, they went boy hunting. The farmers jumped in their trucks and took off, and these boys never really had a chance. What they saw woods, and they thought they would run all night, but they were going to have to run across roads and across railroad tracks. And these men would just be sitting there in their trucks with their lights out waiting on them, and then they'd catch them, And one man, Calvin Creamer, made a statement that chilled my blood and everybody else that's ever heard it. There was a place worse than the White House, and it was in the piney woods of Florida. He said, quote, back then it was torture for the boys. They were mean men to begin with. When they caught them, they'd strip them and tie them over 55-gallon steel drums, bare naked, and then they'd beat them. And the police didn't care either. And I thought to myself, trying to imagine being stripped naked with a bunch of big, rough farmers, and that was bad. But what was really bad, I didn't think about it for days later, we had the luxury of being knocked down a foot into that bed. We had a mattress and springs absorbing some of the blows. These boys were beaten against steel, naked. They would not have gotten out of there without permanent damage or death. I will believe that. I stand behind that. They can call me a liar all day long, but I believe that.
You also believe that people may have turned a blind eye to some of this because because you allege they benefited from what was going on.
If you didn't work there, you had a relative that worked there. We're talking about a small town, and this employed 160 people. And yes, there were people that quit over the beatings. There were people that objected to it. The rest,
makes me
jobs
wonder
were
how the
scarce.
beatings
do that,
can
or you're going
be.
to find yourself out in the fields under the hot sun picking some farmer.
How can they be so bad that people's quitting work and nobody do nothing about it? Doesn't make sense to me. Sad. It's a major failure.
Produce. And so people put up with it. I know that Elmore Bryant and he was a former mayor. He made a statement late. The last thing he said really bothered me. He said, a lot of bad things happened to the boys and to the staff, there as well, people are afraid. And I thought, what did they do to the staff? You know,
You believe the people who are, and you can chime in as well, Andrew. You all believe that some of the residents in Marianna benefited financially.
yes, absolutely. They were skimming off that farm. I've seen some reports, and when I look at them and I look at the figures, they don't look right to me.
So a
You're
possible
talking about a
explanation why
1,000-acre
nothing was
farm
done.
that
Money.
made millions of dollars.
Root of all
You know, they
evil.
put out produce by the ton. They had
And back
beef,
then,
they-
that's a lot of money, $1 million.
Yes,
Yeah.
they had beef, they had pigs, they had lumber, they had every kind of produce you could think of, sugar cane, you know, gosh, they had everything going that they could get a brick plant that spewed out 20,000 bricks a day. You know, and this was all done by the labor, and they actually changed the law back around 1907. Judge Milton changed the law to where they could send you up there on an indeterminate sentence to be approved by the men that ran the school. In other words, they could keep you there as long as they wanted to, and they could also pick boys up for smaller things like incorrigible, truancy, shoplifting, you know, small crimes. They'd send them up there because they had this great farm going, but they needed a lot of labor. And
Including
this started back in
plantations, you
2007,
say.
or I'm sorry, 1907. You know, by 1915 or 1918, that farm was really cranking it out, and it continued to do that because they had the men up there to do it. One man called me, he was a black guy, an old man, and he said, you know, I got picked up for truancy. And I said, how long were you there? And he said, 5 years. And I said, did they beat you? And he said, yeah. He said, I never could understand why they beat me like they did because I never stole nothing. And I thought, how sad.
Well, you all, and I guess, and I'm saying that because it's your experience and your stories, but it's been told by others that some of the boys who were there were not necessarily wayward boys. They were boys who were orphaned. So
Yes.
just not having
That just
family.
didn't have no family that wanted them.
There was a man that made a comment about there were no orphans there. There were no boys for truancy. These were
Hey,
all the worst
Love
of the worst.
Lark,
You know?
how are
And I
you?
thought, Maloney, this has got to be a way to prove that. I went into the archives again. It took me a week, and I found a set of photographs that a man had taken over a decade, 47 photographs, and I counted 170 boys under 12, and I realized how many boys are not in the picture. Then I found some other evidence that, and we learned that they had thousands of boys up there, little boys. I'm talking about 5, 6 years old, up 7, 8 years old. You got pictures of them. You know, the man has pictures of them. They're right on my webpage. You look at them, and they're like little 5 or 6 year old boys. What did they do to get up there? How did they get there? How did they get out? You know, and anybody could go up there and parole a boy out just by signing his name.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, you know, and that bothers me greatly to think of the amount of little boys they had.
I interviewed one guy for my book, and he was from the city of Marianna, and him and his brother, but the little brother didn't get sent to Marianna, but he got sent to Marianna. You know what his crime was? They took 2 Coca-Colas off the back of a truck, and he ended up spending 5 years in Marianna, you know, for stealing a Coca-Cola. And he was also sexually molested by a staff member, and he was under 12. So there's no statute of limitations on that crime, but they didn't really, they said that this happened in 52. So they said the perpetrator is probably dead, but they didn't really look to see if he was really dead, because I found a bunch of information on, because he gave FDLE the last name of the man, and I found him in the Yellow Jacket. The Yellow Jacket is the newspaper from the school.
You've been also doing a lot of other research because amongst your papers there, you have names that have different colors, and you've done a whole schematic. And so you've been doing some research. Tell us about what you have
Well, I'm
there.
trying to find this list of runaway boys, if they survived, you know, past the date of their escape. And I usually do most of my research up here on College Boulevard, 9th Avenue at the Genealogy Library. And you can see I color code them. If it's green or orange, green is they definitely survived. I found a Social Security death index, or I found they got married or they went into the military.
So you would give them colors based on your
Yeah,
research
because
and the
for my
categories
own-
for
for
your
my-
own little
yeah.
schematics there. But
Yes.
I just wanted to bring that up because obviously you've been doing a great deal of research.
It's
in order
very
to try to
tedious.
do that.
It's extremely
Well,
tedious work.
you both have written books.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about, you've been telling us about your books with your stories and with those of those who are not here to tell theirs. You obviously were inspired to put these in book form. Tell us about your books.
Well, the book I wrote with Roger Kaiser, one of the 4 original White House boys. This is kind of a
Not that I'm not interested in their books or their stories or anything of that nature, but I'm going to fast forward just a little bit and see if we can get out of the book talking about that. If you're interested in their book, you can Google it and whatnot.
Brought us up there. They knew a storm was coming. The story had broke, and they brought us up there. We had a ceremony. They unveiled the plaque. We acknowledged the tribulation of the boys. They planted a tree, and for their suffering, they let us go through the White House. And the last thing they did was take us over to the 31
The White
unmarked
House, as in
graves.
the White House at the
Yes,
school.
they opened it up, and you could hear them say, oh my God, it must be true, you know, because the place looks like a torture chamber. And that's exactly what they were doing in there. And then the last thing they did is they took us over to the 31 unmarked graves on the black side. Now, when we left, Mary Zansky the superintendent had been so nice to us, had to step down. Gus Barrero was fired. They tried to ruin him politically, and that was when the last thing that we did was Michael stood on the steps of Tallahassee and asked the governor for the investigation, and that was it.
And I understand former Governor Charlie Crist was very
that's right.
instrumental in getting this going, and also Senator Bill Nelson has
Bill Nelson
stepped
wants
in.
the DOJ to step in, and I agree with him totally.
Okay.
Because when they do, they can show up at somebody's house with their badge and say, "We'd like to talk to you."
Right.
former
Let me
employee.
say this. Several bodies have been discovered, as we know, with the exhumation of graves on the property and that sort of thing. They have discovered several bodies, and that's been ongoing.
24.
Many more than what
24
was-
more than the FDLE said that 31. This was the only graveyard. There are no more graves, yada, yada, yada. And Professor Aaron Kimberly found them in a week and a half after the USF got their permit to go in and inspect the cemetery. Because when they closed Dozier, it became a historic cemetery. And she went in and found it, and found there wasn't 31 bodies under there. They were all in the woods, hidden from sight, totally.
And that too, is ongoing
That
investigation.
is ongoing. And
as well.
the one that really just, to me, is the last straw is there was a boy up in Pennsylvania that she felt had been murdered. And she went up there and talked to the family and asked if she could exhume the body. And it was a small town. Everybody was there from the mayor. To the
This
fire
is
chief, to the
wild.
police chief. They brought the casket up, or they dug down to it. She opened the lid. There was no body in there. There was just boards weighted down, right? And she took every board out because some of the remains there was nothing but teeth and jawbone, in the cemetery that she found, Boot Hill, as they call it. And she took every board out. There was nothing there. She even took the bottom out down to where somebody's grandmother was buried. They buried the boy on top of the grandmother. So, the boards and the coffin hardware matched exactly to the coffins that they had found in the Boot Hill Cemetery.
But nobody.
Nobody.
I see. Where are you all, the two of you and your organization, the White House Boys? Where do you want to see all this go in just a few minutes? Because we're getting ready to wind down here with about 3 minutes left. Where does all of your work go? Because you've been at this for decades.
I want Professor Aaron Kimberly to wrap it up. She is a brilliant woman, and with she has 10 pages of credentials, and she will wrap it up in a way that the story is told. She'll put an ending to it, and that will be it, and this 7-year thing has gotten to be just torturous for us will end.
And what are you hoping will come from this, Andrew?
I'm hoping that I think it's been proved without a shadow of a doubt that Florida was negligent in the running of that reform school, and I think the men should be compensated. And
Absolutely, and they haven't
we've
yet.
already had 80 White House boys die since this has started. I know several of them right now that have cancer. Many of them are living in poverty, and I think they should be compensated. I think Florida should do the right thing and just compensate these men for the treatment they received when they were supposed to be being reformed. I would like to say one story. One boy I interviewed, or a man I interviewed, he was beat in the White House, and he got back to his hometown, and he actually planned on going back with this other boy that had been beaten in the White House and murdering the people that abused him. Now, there's something wrong with a reform school that turns teenage boys into having thoughts of murder.
And there are stories of some of the products of the school going on to have a number of aggressive types of behavior.
Learned through
and
generations.
issues and that
One
sort of
woman
thing.
called me and she says, I now know why my husband beat me and my daughter so badly. And I said, oh, your husband was at Mariana? And she said, no, his father was. This was like throwing a rock in a pond. It just burned through generations.
Well, on your website, there are several stories of gentlemen who ended up either incarcerated, kicked out of the military, or a number of other aggressive
end up
issues.
with
Andrew,
rage.
excuse me, Andrew.
Dee, those two boys went into the military instead of going up and murdering their abusers. So it turned out to be a good story.
I'm glad you finished that. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I'm really trying to get you guys
Okay.
to
Wrap it up.
kind of, no, not necessarily wrap it up, but utilize the time that we have because an hour has gone by so quickly.
That was quick.
I will give you an opportunity for, I think we have about a minute and a half left.
I think Andrew is right. I think they should give some compensation to those boys because they really, they were left
We've
with a
got
rage
Big
problem,
Stick
those
around.
beatings left anger.
So
problems, not
sorry
rage.
if you hear us coughing in the
And
background.
and let it be a lesson that when you hand unlimited power and a whip to anybody, it's not going to turn out right.
All right, Andrew, final words.
Well, one thing I would like to say is when I interviewed the boys, I had a lot of anger in me, and I can see the anger in my writing. But I would like to say that I believe the FDLE is an honest organization and honest lawmen. I think they did the best that they could do under very difficult circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, these were the stories of Robert Straley, Andrew Pugh. Courageous you are to come here and be on the Aware Show and talk with us, and we so appreciate it.
Okay, so that's basically the end of that. That's the introduction. That completes the introduction to Dozier School for Boys. We're going to get a little deeper into it, not on this live, but another one. I'm not prepared yet, but we're going to get deeper into it, and we're going to talk about more specific guards that done things like Mr. Tidswell, the one-armed guard, if you remember hearing about him in the stories and things of that nature. I dropped a link to Meet the White House Boys. There is a Facebook group, and somehow but there is a Facebook group, and I dropped the link to it. We hear you, baby. We hear you. So now that we went over Dozier, I think what I'm going to do now is start Gypsy Rose, because everybody is so infatuated with this right now, obsessed with it. I am a little bit. I've been watching it too. I've been getting a kick out of the memes. What I see a lot is people having big feelings about this. Some people think, oh, give me just a second, guys. So now it's become a game. This is now a game, and I've made it a game, and he's not going to stop because he's my kid and he's competitive. So I'm going to end the stream. This is not going to be probably the last stream of 2023. I'll try to come back on later so we can talk Gypsy Rose, but I'm going to have to end it right here, guys, because he isn't going to let me speak. But if I don't speak to you all again, have a happy new year, and yeah.